I get a lot of questions and comments about people wanting to see more of the Super Dually project. Since the videos that I had up there of the first test drive, I only got about a month and a half of actual test driving before this vehicle had to pull 10,000 pounds trailer weight and internal weight of the trailer combined. It had to haul all that from North Carolina to Florida up in the Panhandle. It was about 700 miles. It was a pretty good trek. It did it with no sway bar or anything. All I had really was a track bar, no steering stabilizer. I had the alignment performed, but I mean, still a $250,000 Cummins, which is, you know, nothing, but oil leaks are still things that can happen, you know, even on a 100,000 mile vehicle. So just a little bit of overview of the suspension. Off-road design brackets. You get the solid axle swap bracket for the ball joint style F350 mono tube. This was off of a dually, so it's already set up for the dually that I have, obviously. So the track width was actually the same. Everything was, you know, as far as the width of the axle, everything fits really well. The off-road design kit is in. I ended up making an access hole for the leaf spring hanger shackle. I did have one kind of a major problem with it. You can actually see that there's a gap here now, but before, the 1/4 inch steel that the bracket was made of came all the way down and wrapped around, and I had to cut that off because it was rubbing into the leaf spring shackle. It was really bad on the passenger side, so what I did was, you can just see I've still got 3 bolts in there holding it up there for alignment purposes, and then I just welded it all the way around the frame, or to the frame. Biggest reason for going solid axle swap with the Cummins was solid axle is cooler, easier to work on, stronger. Doesn't really, I wouldn't say it rides better. I would say it rides better than IFS with torsion bars, but if you've got a 2-wheel drive truck with the coil springs are far superior to leaf springs and torsion bars in almost every conceivable way. So, I mean, you can argue that however you want to, but I mean, coil springs are more progressive and a smoother rate than just about every other design out there. That's why everything has coil springs now. It's got WFO Concepts plates with U-bolts. I had to notch the corner of the forward axle so that it didn't allow the spring to move around and everything. I cannot remember the brand of these. I just put these on here. This is the original IFS sway bar. I haven't even driven it yet with this sway bar on. I put the sway bar on about a week ago, and then last weekend I actually did manage to get my sway bar links on. These are actually for a Dodge, like a 98 to 04 1500. They're the ones that are supposed to mount to the really thick part of the axle tube. This is just 3/16 steel with a washer. That way I didn't end up cutting, the nut didn't end up cutting or running out of threads. It looks really good. Everything fits really well. I really hope that the sway bar being connected now is going to take away the truck's body roll and wanting to float all around the highway. It definitely needs a steering stabilizer. The sheer unsprung weight of the solid axle and the tires and everything, it just throws the steering wheel all around with big bumps. I really want to go with steering assist, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. Just haven't had the money or had the time to do it. These are rough stuff shock hoops. They came out really well. Didn't really do any major lining up with the shock hoop, just kind of went with it. Just eyeballed it really well and then just set it the way I wanted it to, and yeah, it all worked out pretty well. This is also Off-Road Designs brake lines, steel braided brake lines for their Ford trucks. They are banjo fittings which you don't have the little alignment tab anymore. It's not a square block like it's supposed to be for these factory calipers. It's supposed to have a square that keeps them lined up and then they go straight out. I like these better because I was able to angle them towards it. And everybody's seen the move bumpers that I built in the other videos. Still have no lights and still have no winch. Turbo tube and everything did fine. Blew this turbo line just before I did the trip because I didn't flare any of my pipes after I cut them. Yeah, I know, common rookie mistake. I didn't think I was going to need to, and I ended up needing to. And figuring out how to put a nice bead roll on them was kind of a pain. I did it fairly easily, but it was still a pain. It was actually this pipe that I blew out. Just had to roll the inner fender out. That doesn't touch the tire or anything, but all the steering is made by Rough Stuff. It's a kit that's sent to you and then you can build it. And I really like their kits because you get this bung that goes into the actual tube itself, and then you can hold this while you undo the jam nut, and then you can actually have something to turn the bar from on either side. So I really like that. There is Rough Stuff. You have to drill your tie rod in, your knuckles out for the 1-ton tie rod ends, and you can do that, but you have to have the conical shape for the tie rod end itself. Well, you can either buy the taper tool, which is like $50 to $100, they range depending on brands, or Rough Stuff offers a $20 insert that you can put in that actually gives the cone shape to like a 1/2 inch hole or something like that. You just drill it all the way through and then just drop the sleeve in there and it turns it into a cone. I can't really get it, but it is there, I assure you. So all that looks really good. These are my shocks. This is the part number for my shocks front and rear. These are actually for the older trucks with the solid axle 87 and older Chevy trucks. You'll have to look that part number up, but I think these are like overall length is like 22 inches or something. They're really tall shocks. I know I've got 6 inches I've got 6 inches for compression and 6 inches for extension sitting at ride height. So I've got more than enough shock for articulation. I'll probably never get anywhere close to that, up or down. The track bar is also Rough Stuff, which is welded to the axle tube, and then it goes over to the passenger side. And the drag link and the track bar, they're mostly parallel. I tried to keep them as close as I could. I could have gone up with this side, but I definitely couldn't come down with the other end anymore because I didn't want to end up running into the axle if I wanted to flex. Does the drag bar take away some flex? Yes, of course it does. It also makes it kind of handle a little funny because this side can go up and down easily, but the other side kind of can't because the way the geometry works with the track bar, you're trying to do this because the body has to roll upwards. And because that side is attached to the body, you're actually trying to pull the axle when the vehicle is trying to rock. So you actually have to move the axle left and right when it does that. Also, another design of a track bar that makes it not really work very well with a leaf spring is when this goes up and down. This is the outside of a circle. That's your radius to the center of the circle. So when this end, which is over there, when it rolls, it actually gets shorter as it goes up, and it gets shorter as it goes down. Because, well, actually it's going to get a little longer when it goes up because it's not perfectly flat, it's actually angled down. So as it comes up, it's going to get longer this way, and when it goes down, it's going to get shorter that way as it goes down. That works really well on coil springs, but not so much on leaf springs because your eyelets you have to put that energy somewhere. So to go that way, it actually has to pull on this, or it has to twist the leaf spring in some fashion. When you have, I guess anything as far as control arms go, like on the Dodges with the coil springs, they will actually just flex a little bit to the left and right because you've got rubber bushings that are in the back control arms. So, I mean, it is what it is. You don't have to have a track bar, but it's a lot easier to drive with a track bar. The older Chevy trucks didn't have track bars because their steering went forward and back. On the other side, you didn't have crossover steering. With crossover steering, when you turn left and right, it does this with the leaf spring. It actually rolls it, and that was the problem that I was having. So having this prevents my leaf spring itself from warping, and it makes it a lot easier and more predictable to drive on the road. And as far as everything that goes on back here, just get in here. Off-road design, rear shackle flip. This is the factory shackle. It needs to be replaced. It's very rusty. I'm surprised it hasn't broken. I was really worried about that breaking with 10,000 pounds sitting on the rear hitch, but it did not break, amazingly. Like I said, same part number shocks. With the dualies, you will have to shim down the holes back here, because for whatever reason on the 2500 and 3500 they put a bigger bolt on the bottom than the 1500s. I want to say this is like a 3/4 bolt. I know it's a 19 millimeter head and the other one was like a 21. They just went to a bigger bolt on the bottom shock mount for the 25 and 3500s, and it wouldn't allow, the bolt wouldn't go through. So I just bought 2 washers that were really thick, and it actually took up the space in between here for this shock. So it actually worked out really well. What else? The exhaust is actually the Diamondback exhaust 4-inch with a muffler. I wanted a muffler. The exhaust is actually for a Dodge. It's for a Dodge 3500 extended cab. I looked up their wheelbase, and their wheelbase is about the exact same wheelbase as this 3500 dually crew cab. And when you look at the components of the Diamondback exhaust, all their components are straight. And I was like, well, the only problem I should have will be the torsion bar cross member, which is up there, which I'll show you in a second. I actually had to notch it out just to get everything to fit. But yeah, it's a 4-inch exhaust for a Dodge truck that fit perfectly. Obviously, it was the 4-inch exhaust for the Cummins version, and it bolted right to the turbo, and it's turbo back, and everything fit. The only thing I had to change was I cut one piece of pipe that was this long, it's about this long, off of one of those up there, so I could put the turbo a little bit farther forward and get my axle center line with the actual curve here. And then I had to have that little bit to add here so that I could clear my shackle flip. If you don't have a shackle flip, this won't be an issue. And you can keep your exhaust higher up and you can keep it tighter to your body. But because I had a shackle flip, this actually all came down, so I had to move my exhaust down, because if not, I was going to hit this, and you flex a little bit, you'll hit it. So I moved it down, and all the mounts are back to the factory mounts, and it came with all these different funky looking bent kind of U-shaped bolts and all this other weird looking stuff. I'm guessing it all fit the Dodge truck and you were supposed to replace it. I did not. I just cut it all up and made each piece fit the way I needed it to. I just curved it and put it back to where it needed to be. Cut it off, spin it around, put it where you want it, and tack it. And that's how I fixed everything. It was stainless steel, so it was kind of a pain to get it to weld, but had it been a little bit more of a structural component, I probably would have been worried about it, but because it wasn't, I'm not super worried about it. That's the notch I had to do. If you actually have a 6-inch lift kit and you keep the, if you end up dropping this bar down because you have an IFS lift kit, you won't have that problem. It probably would have fit with the IFS and no lift, but you would have had to have notched this and moved it up or something. I did not want to run into this doing that, just sitting at idle. And biggest thing with the Cummins making it fit was I had to add, you can see the bolt holes for, there we go, the center support for the drive shaft. I actually had to elongate them a little bit because I had to move the center support back. Actually, everything had to move back quite a bit. Even the transmission mount is sitting all the way back. It's just about as far as it can go. And I had originally drilled some holes for the cross member, but I put it right back to where it was in stock position. And it's been doing perfectly fine ever since. And this is a brand new Midwest transmission. They got me all fixed up with a brand new, and I didn't want to have to source one and rebuild it or anything like that and upgrade the 5th gear nut and all that crap. I was like, I'll just drop the $2,500 on it. Might as well. But so far the body is solid. Everything else is pretty good on the truck. It's got the slightly thicker frame. It's 1/4 inch steel or something compared to, I don't know, 3/16 on the 1500. Never really measured it, don't really care. If I need my frame to be stronger, I'll add more crap to it. The interior is nice. I don't have a whole lot going on in the interior right now. I want a pyrometer, I want a boost gauge, all the typical stuff. I just got done putting new door pins on this door and the other door, and greased everything with this latch is really screwed up. All the gauges except for the tachometer and the fuel gauge currently work. Everything works. It's as simple as just finding your wires and running all your wires and everything. The fuel gauge doesn't work because it's a Chevy and it's a fuel gauge. Do I need to really say any more? It's either the cluster or it's the sending unit. I'm pretty sure it's the cluster because it never moved when I got it, but I never did get to drive it because I had a blown up 6.5. So I have an RPM gauge. It's actually sitting in the back seat. Let me see if I can grab it. That way everybody knows which one it is. Because this is probably the best solution to the problem. Because if you haven't done one of these swaps, which you probably haven't, that's why you're watching this. This is what you're going to need. If you had a diesel, holy crap, I'm having a hard time getting this box out. If you had a diesel, the alternator is what gave the truck's tax signal. You will need part number 2888 for a tachometer. And what this actually has in here is this really big hose clamp band that straps a pickup to the alternator. And then you can actually set this gauge to what your RPMs are. So how do you know what your RPMs are? Well, no, there's very simple, easy process. So you have to go on Amazon and buy a laser photo tachometer. Super cheap, basic tachometer. You're gonna take a little piece of sticky tape or strip or something that's reflective so that the laser bounces back to this, and you're gonna put it on the crank, and then you're gonna sit there at idle. It actually tells you to run it up to highway speed or whatever you're cruising, overdrive. I don't really care to do it that accurately, but you're going to put that on there, and that is going to fix your issue with having no tachometer. There is one other option. You can get a really big reluctor wheel that goes onto the Cummins crank, I believe. Diesel Conversion Specialists offers that. I do have some parts from them. If you want to go that route, it's like $300-400 to keep the factory tack, or you can spend $150 on that tachometer. Your choice. If you want the factory tack, that's fine. Me, I hate the whole Chevy factory tack. I made it work. They suck for the most part because you can't replace the individual stepper motors. They're air core stepper motors, and they are notorious for going out and being inaccurate. But the truck is pretty much clean, all in all. That's why I spent $3,000 on a roller chassis, because there was like nothing wrong with the interior of the truck, and it only had 114,000 on it when I got it. I've put about 1,000 miles on it with the Cummins in it, and everything is done fine so far. This is my custom shifter boot, also known as my coat, and I made the hole a little too big. So I got to fill the hole in, and this is what I'm using for a shifter boot. It's the Mr. Gasket 9649. I have one of these in my 1500 that has an NV 4500 in it, and this thing does great. It fits over the hole completely. And this was, believe it or not, one of the hardest things to figure out for the whole swap was, where the hell do I get a shifter boot from? Well, this one works. It's very tall. The hole is actually for one of those flat Hearst style shifters that comes up and curves and everything. Just pull the little metal band from around it if you need to. You probably won't need to. Just leave it on there, and then just slide this all the way around this curve here, and it fits perfectly. And then drill your hole, screw it down or whatever, but I have to put a plate there because I drilled too much, or cut too much, drilled, whatever. But the truck is clean, everything works. If you want to see under the hood, let's do that, because it's already going to be a 30-minute video. But I'm trying to be as detailed as possible so everybody knows. That's just a piece of 1 3/4 exhaust that I flared at the ends with just running bead around it, and then silicone hoses. This is a 4BT upper water outlet. This is Diesel Conversion Specialist giant mount here. This is actually a 4.3G alternator. They tell you to run the 100 amp alternator. This is a 130 amp alternator. There is a 220 amp alternator. If you feel the need that you need 220 amps of power, by all means, there is one out there, and it will work very well if you run like a fuel system or something like that, that, you know, you need to pump fuel from one vehicle to another. That's what you need. If you need a transfer tank, by all means, put a 220 amp alternator on your thing. That's all the factory wiring for the 6.5. I think I'm using 2 things in there, maybe. I don't remember. I don't even think that's that much. Yep, there's one wire for the coolant tank, and then there's this red wire that I don't remember what it's for. I ran it over here. I've got it plugged into, yeah, something. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a long time, and I was sick when I wired all this. But I think that's about it. The coolant reservoir does tell me in the cluster if my coolant's low. I have all that figured out. Don't have AC yet. That's going to happen, but this is a really cool kit. It's like $600. It was very expensive, yes, but you get another tensioner. I think it's the 2500 tensioner for the Dodges in the 24 valve era, I want to say. It didn't fit exactly, this mount plate didn't fit the way I wanted it to, so I actually ended up flipping it around and then shaving it down because I needed the clearance for something. I can't remember why. But either way, it does work. The belt that they sent me did not work. That's the belt that's working for me with the Ford 3G alternator, and then you need to make sure you get the 8-rib pulley for your Ford 3G alternator. I don't have the part numbers for that either. I forgot all this stuff. I had all this stuff wrote down, and in the process of moving to Florida and everything, I have lost most of my stuff. This is a basic 3-inch intercooler pipe kit that I bought off of eBay. Just your super basic kit, aluminum pipes and silicone connectors. I will say that you will need the 270 degree connectors to go from the corner here and then cut back at an angle like so. That's not called a 45. A 45 is obtuse. Whatever. I guess I don't know how they measure things anymore. But that's not the way I was taught in geometry. And this is the original 6.5 radiator. I wanted to keep this rather than transferring over to the 454. If you transfer over to the 454 radiator, you actually have a radiator cap. With the 6.5, you have a surge tank. These engines never originally had surge tanks. I wanted a surge tank. Surge tanks are better, I guess. I mean, one's not really better than the other, but I wanted a surge tank because I like to be able to fill it up at the reservoir, and then it purges the whole system through the radiator. So if you ever get like a big old bubble or something in your engine, it surges back up into this rather than blowing coolant hoses and stuff. Down here, this was one of the biggest things trying to figure out. This is a 1 3/4 water inlet coming off the radiator, and then this is like a 2 1/4. 2 1/4, I believe, is the size of the inlet going into a Cummins. You will not find a 90 degree S-bend kind of funky thing that goes from 2 1/4 to 1 3/4. There's no way you're gonna find one. I looked all over God's green earth and tried to find something. So the only way I could figure out how to come up with something that would work was to take another piece of exhaust pipe that was 1 3/4 and have it flared out to a 2 1/4, so that I could just buy a 2 1/4 silicone hose and a 1 3/4 silicone hose and make it work. That was the easiest thing to do. Also, the surge tank is 1 inch here, and then it comes and has to go into the lower neck for the 6BT. So you can actually see there's my thermo switch that completes the ground for my fans, and then under that is my 90 for my expansion tank. And then the 2 lines for my heater core are on the bottom and then on the side. I think that's how I said that. I said that right, didn't I? Yeah, the one on the bottom, I'm sorry. The one on the bottom that you can see under that bolt head, that goes from the expansion tank. And then that one and this one are for the heater core. I got an oil leak. Cummins. So that's how all that works. That's how you plumb up your heater core. As far as making everything fit on this side, if you buy a vacuum brake booster truck, you won't have any problems. If you have Hydro Boost, you need to switch your power steering pump over to the Hydro Boost power steering pump, or you will have lack of braking effort. That was another one of the hurdles of this. Just make sure you buy a 98 Dodge 2500 Cummins. Those came with Hydro Boost, and you can buy the power steering pump for it. This is a 96 engine. It had vacuum brakes on it. So make sure you buy a Hydro Boost pump and put that on, and you'll get your braking effort back. Anything else? Yeah, clutch system is an entire Dodge clutch system. Everything from slave cylinder all the way down to the clutch itself is all Dodge. The only thing that's not Dodge is the clutch pedal itself. The clutch pedal is Chevrolet. I just bought a Chevrolet one out of a 4.3 V6. It's the same thing as everything else. Now, my pedal for my clutch sits a lot higher than my brake pedal. That's the way I set it up. That's the way I wanted it. You're probably not going to be able to see it. I'll try and show it to you. But right up there is the rod, and I had to weld a bolt in there to actually lengthen the rod for the clutch. And you need to do that, because if not, then the pedal kind of sits really far on the floor. The eyelet for the clutch master cylinder is the same eyelet that Chevrolet uses. It goes right onto your factory Chevy clutch pedal. It works perfect. It's amazing how much parts Dodge and Chevy actually share. But that's pretty much it, and it's the gist of it. You know, everybody can figure out their own engine mounts and plates. But, you know, everybody's always asking me, how did I do the solid axle swap? How did I do everything here and there and that? So that's pretty much it. And it's kind of hard to see my mounts, but I made my own 3/16 plate steel mounts. They're very basic in design. I didn't want anything super crazy. That's them. So it comes, it's a flat, and then it drops down this way, and then through the center of it, I have a reinforcement plate. I didn't want to go fully boxed, and I think that is much stronger than the factory, because the factory one was like, I don't know, it was like paper thin compared to the 3/16 steel. It's welded on both sides, top, bottom, reinforced. And then up here, the frame curves down, so I put a little tab in there that keeps that nice and flat. And then those brackets up there are the ones on Summit Racing to convert for the, those are actually for the older trucks, so the 87 and back. And they share the same mounts as the IFS trucks. So it all worked out really well. But that's it. That's a 30-minute long video. If anybody's got any more questions, comments, and concerns, I'll get to it as best I can. But, I mean, that's pretty much it in its entirety. The wiring is just kind of something you have to figure out. It's about as simple as it can possibly get. You know, this wiring your fuel solenoid and everything is pretty straightforward. You need key on power. There's a lot of things in the fuse relay that are fuse center that are key on power. I'll give you a hint. My fuel solenoid is wired to my key on power fuel pump that was in the inline fuel pump for the 6.5. I just use the same wire. So if I ever pop a fuse for my fuel supply, guess what? It's that. So I try and simplify it and make it as factory as possible. The oil pressure is down there. It goes right behind the power steering pump. You have to remove that to remove the power steering pump. It's kind of a pain, but it works. And then your coolant temperature sensor is back there, hiding somewhere on the back of the cylinder block. That's a simple one wire thing too. So it's pretty straightforward as far as wiring that to the gauge. Get a book, read some schematics, you'll be fine. And I have no ABS. That's a JEGS brake proportioning valve that's manual. It worked really well. If you turn that sucker all the way up, you get some hella good rear brakes. Some really good rear brakes. But that's pretty much it, guys. Got questions? Let me know.